We have lots to discuss in today's NHL news video. Today we're looking at some trade talk around the Edmonton Oilers, Columbus Blue Jackets, Montreal Canadiens, as well as the latest on Yaroslav Askarov. Plus we have some further updates on the offer sheet situation. We have some interesting comments from Blues GM Doug Armstrong. Some further updates on the Ryan Johansen contract termination that we saw earlier today. Plus the Kraken have signed Beniers to a very lucrative long-term deal. All that and some details on the 25 NHL draft coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about today. It's been another very eventful, very busy NHL news day. For some starters, we're going to start with some updates on some other items that we discussed earlier that we've, like I said, since learned a little bit more information and gotten some more quotes and comments on. For example, let's start with the big news that started our day today, which was the offer sheet situation between the St. Louis Blues and the Edmonton Oilers, with the Blues being successful in landing Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway from the Edmonton Oilers. They decided not to match the offer sheets, so they're now officially members of the St. Louis Blues. Of course, Broberg and Holloway both get 2-year deals. Broberg gets $4.5 million and change, and Holloway $2.29 million and change. So obviously, like I said, those offer sheets were very deliberate. They're very aggressive, and they're very on point, exactly the amounts they wanted. It was a coordinated effort there, and they ended up being successful. The Oilers made some moves we saw, and I think they made the Cody Ceci trade and freed up some space in order to kind of try to pry some extra assets out of St. Louis. Plus, I think they also saw an opportunity to gain a little bit of cap flexibility. They put themselves in a spot where they could have matched, and I think they were going to the Blues and having some negotiations, saying that essentially, we could match, and if you don't want us to match, make it worth our while type of deal. And then they made an extra little trade where the Blues gave up a third-round pick in 2028 and a defensive prospect to the Oilers. So they got that for future considerations. So essentially, that's what they threw in as a incentive to not match. Now, of course, since the offer sheet announcement came, we've since heard from Holloway, we've heard from Broberg, we've heard from Doug Armstrong. Lots of interesting quotes out there. Broberg seemed pretty, basically saying it was all business, that there's an opportunity for him that he's looking forward to. To be honest, listening to Dylan Holloway speak, I don't know how excited he is. I mean, to me, I think he almost didn't come off as being genuine to me. I think he was a little bit disappointed the Oilers didn't match. I'm not sure he was really expecting that. So he gets, an opportunity, though, that he can probably get a bigger role in St. Louis. So we'll see. Doug Armstrong's quote, though, I found very intriguing. He says that if there's a GM code not to do offer sheets, then nobody emailed it to me. He says it was reported that if Kenny Holland was in charge of the Oilers, that I never would have done this. And that's not true. And I would do it to my own mother if she was manning the Oilers. He says, my responsibility is to do what's best and look after the St. Louis Blues. And that's what I'm here to do. So essentially a comical quote, and obviously I'm not sure completely buy the fact that he wouldn't have attacked one of his best friends in Kenny Holland, but at the same time, you know what, it should be that way. It's just business. Business is business. Lots of these people around the NHL are friends. They've worked together. They've formed friendships. They've played together. They've known each other for years. It's not really that big of a circle of people if you really think about all the people that work in management and coaches and everybody. It's a small fraternity. So you know what? Lots of people are quite familiar with each other. Lots of good friendships across the league. And you know what? They really shouldn't be afraid of that. It's just business. And I'd like to see more GMs look at it that way, and I hope to see the tool used more, because I think it would make the league a lot more interesting, and certainly a lot more from an entertainment perspective for the fan base. So that part was interesting. So the Blues got their players. We'll see what comes next for the Oilers, which we're going to talk about here a little bit later. We also saw the big other update here today, Ryan Johansen being terminated from the Philadelphia Flyers. Did not see that coming. Now, we know Johansen was traded to the Flyers at the deadline from the Avalanche in the Sean Walker deal, and right after being traded to the Flyers, he notified them that he was injured and unable to play. Of course, they had put him on waivers right away, and they were going to be demoting him to the minors. Well, of course, he didn't want to do that, said he was injured and couldn't report. So they worked with them. I know they seemed annoyed by it based on listening to comments from GM Danny Briere and the staff there. But basically they said they were how their doctors look at them and kind of come to a conclusion. And I'm not really sure what those conclusions were, just that we never really heard a whole lot more about it. And I would suspect that they've probably been in touch with him recently, trying to see if he would report to training camp. Would be my guess. And I'm assuming they were told that he wouldn't be because he's injured. And they don't seem like they're buying the injury thing anymore. So they felt that they had a good enough case to put his contract on unconditional waivers for the purpose of termination. So now, since then, since that video, because that's obviously both these scenarios, the offer sheets and the termination, have their own dedicated videos from earlier. But like I said, some updates here. Now we have comments from his agent, Kurt Overhart, Ryan Johansen, the response to the contract termination, saying essentially that he has a severe hockey injury that requires a extensive surgery, which they do have scheduled, by the way. Ryan has worked with the Flyers in good faith, and their attempt to terminate the contract is disappointing, and that Overhart and Johansen have been in touch with the NHLPA to begin the grieving process. So this is going to 100% be grieved. They may come to their own settlement perhaps before it gets to an arbitrator. It's hard to say how that's going to go. Could drag on for some time. I don't think those things usually don't happen super quick. But yeah, now Kurt Overhart, just for context purposes here, also the agent that represents Cutter Gauthier. You know how that relationship went with the Philadelphia Flyers. So I think there's multiple things at play here. I guess what some people have said, and I guess they're hoping, is that Overhart doesn't have bad feelings towards the Flyers over the Gauthier situation and had encouraged Johansen to do anything. We don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that he did or he didn't. I've seen people talking online wondering, and I was like, well, you have to give. I mean, we have no reason to think Overhart wouldn't be doing his job properly here. We have no evidence of that. Johansen, obviously, we know his relationship with John Tortorella. It's well documented that he's not a fan of him, and could be a case of just not wanting to go to the minors or not wanting to play for Torts. I don't know. That's just an opinion. I can't prove that, of course, but that's how things look. And obviously, the Johansen camp and his agent are not happy about it and fully intend to grieve. So we'll see where that goes. Could be a little bit before we find out anything further there. A couple signings today, including a big one in Seattle. The Seattle Kraken have come to terms with RFA Matty Beniers, of course, the number 2 overall pick in the 2021 NHL draft. He's got 2 pro seasons now under his belt after playing 2 years of college hockey. After the draft, he ended up being the Rookie of the Year, of course, in 2023. And then, of course, this past year, we did see regression. When he won the Calder Trophy, he was the point leader for rookies with 57 points. And then, of course, this past year, that number dropped down to 46 points. His play was not as good. And overall, the whole team really regressed. It wasn't just Beniers, but it was like the year before when they had a much better season, made the playoffs, won a round. It was like the perfect storm. Everything went right for them. They had so many players hitting career highs and just exceeding expectations. That's why last year I was like, this just is not sustainable. This team really isn't as good as they appeared to be. And I really thought they'd be a prime team for regression, and they were. Did not think Beniers, though, would be such a prime target himself. So he gets a 7-year contract extension at $7.14 million. That's a big bet. And obviously, like a lot of these guys that are drafted highly, getting the 7-8 year deals out of their rookie contracts, most of the time it's clear that it's a good bet. And I really do. I want to think that this is going to be a good bet by Seattle. It's just after what we saw last year, I would have wanted to see a bounce back season before I went long term. A lot of guys you've seen go, in their second year have even better. They take that next step, better than their rookie year, and then when in their final year, you see the contract extension come for the lucrative deal. Well, of course, and some of the college players get a little bit different. Sometimes they get to burn a year off at the end of, it works differently for their when their contracts are going to come due. But $7.14 million is a lot of money for what we saw last year.
I do think long term he has that real strong possibility being that strong two-way centerman that they drafted, and that he will become that. But there's definitely some risk in there, for sure. And I'd be lying if I said anything different. So let me know what you think of the Beniers contract. Is this going to be a good bet, or did the Kraken maybe take some unnecessary risks there? Maybe should they have done a bridge deal first? I mean, the price never goes down. That's the problem, right? You do a bridge deal, you pay through the nose in a couple of years if he explodes. So you kind of take advantage of the fact you had a bit of a down year, but you still believe in him, and you get a lower AAV, and you lock him up. So, I mean, I guess. But we've seen Ron Francis kind of do some different stuff this offseason. He's typically been extremely conservative, and he's certainly been a little bit more of a risk taker this year. I honestly wonder if there might be some pressure from ownership to have a better year this year, because some of the contracts we've seen, like Chandler Stevenson, for example, I was like, whoa, like that to me just seemed really risky. So we'll see how things go, but Beniers gets locked up on a long-term deal, and I don't know, my gut says it'll be okay, but there's definitely part of me that's concerned as well. Tanner Pearson, of course, longtime NHL veteran, not signed, has gotten a PTO with the Vegas Golden Knights. So he will be going to training camp with Vegas, looking to try to earn himself a contract. Some of these guys, too, when you hear them going to on PTOs to camp, it not always, generally speaking, they either get signed with the team they're playing with or not. But sometimes other teams notice them in the preseason, and it still works out to get contracts with other clubs. So, Vegas is a deep team. Will they have a spot for them? It's hard to say. I think with the changes that they made, and they did lose a few players in the offseason, there might be an opportunity there for them to get a spot. But we'll see. Either way, getting into camp on a PTO, even with a deep team, is better than not. Because, like I said, other teams can still take notice, especially in the preseason games. So we'll see what's there. Some updates as well, more on the Amazon broadcast crew that we might see on the Monday night Amazon broadcast coming up that they're taking over for Rogers in Canada this coming season for 24-25. We talked about John Forsland is right now is expected to be the lead play-by-play guy. And then, of course, we've heard guys like Jody Shelley and Thomas Hickey may be analysts that work with the crew. There's now also saying today that longtime host with CBC and TSN, Indy Petrillo, she might be one of the hosts of the program. So we will see where that goes. There's also lots of other names reportedly in the mix. Amazon is really looking to put together a good crew here, and there's lots of different names in the mix. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to get confirmation of that, but another one. She's got tons of experience and has been a great host of lots of other programs. So she did a great job with the Olympics as well, and has worked a lot with she's done Leafs Lunch before with TSN, and she's worked a lot with CBC and has an extensive background in a variety of sports. So I think she'd be a good choice, but we'll see who else they might be considering for the gig as well. And Dave Pagnotta of the fourthperiod.com is reporting that even though the NHL draft is expected to have a new format next year, it's for the fans, it's not going to be drastically different. You're just not going to have all the draft tables on the floor. Fans will still be able to attend, to the best of our knowledge, and still, from that perspective, see the players go on stage and all that. But a lot of teams are going to have their brain trust and their scouts back at their home bases and have a decentralized draft and be working and making their picks remotely. But it still could be a good event. It could still be a marquee event on the NHL calendar. They still have lots of opportunities to make it into a fun process for the drafted players and for fans to attend, etc. We'll be curious to see how they do that. I know after the Sphere 24 draft, that was a pretty cool experience, so be curious to see how they can even come close to making it anywhere near that. But it's expected to possibly be in Los Angeles. Right now, that's the leading contender for where it's going to be, along with the NHL award. So LA may be hosting next up. So we'll see what happens there for the 2025 NHL draft. Now, onto some rumors on things we could see as well. As I talked about, the Oilers have been busy between the offer sheet situation. They traded for Podkolzin, they traded CC to San Jose for Ty Emberson. And actually, one thing we learned about Ty Emberson quickly as well, a little bit of an unknown player, not a well-known name that everybody was super familiar with because he doesn't have a whole lot of NHL experience. He appeared in 30 games for the Sharks last year, but there is an Oilers connection. After looking a little bit further into his history, he would have been coached by Chuck Knobloch, the Oilers bench boss, in the American Hockey League the year before when he was coaching the Hartford Wolfpack, the affiliate of the New York Rangers. So Knobloch is very familiar with this guy. Got to see him up close and personal for a full season there in the American Hockey League. So clearly, I'm sure he had some input here on that player being included in the deal coming back for the CC trade. So obviously, like I said, he's a right shot defenseman, more defensively minded, that could challenge for a third pair spot. But we may see the Oilers. They do have some cap space. It's under $1 million, but at least they're cap compliant. And of course, they have the option to add Kane to long-term injury reserve, assuming that surgery that we've heard about goes ahead here in the next little bit. We may not see a deal involving the Oilers until the season starts. Maybe they have an option to grab a player on waivers, but they're definitely looking, I think, if they can, to add another depth defenseman. Got to keep in mind they also still have Troy Stecher signed as well. They signed him 2 years, under $1 million. He shoots right as well. They have Josh Brown. It's not like they don't have right shot defensemen. I think they have a number of them. There's just between guys like CC and Desharnais. My big concern for the Oilers would be their penalty kill, because their penalty kill in the playoffs was phenomenal, which was a huge part of what led them to be so successful. And CC and Desharnais played a big role in that. You can say what you want about Cody CC, but he was not on the ice in the playoffs for a single power play goal against. So that was going well for him. Desharnais, of course, got the size to clear the front of the net. Now you're looking at guys like Josh Brown, who's, he's got the size like Desharnais does, but I don't know if he's as, he hasn't really been that great during his time in between Arizona, played in Ottawa for a bit. He was in Florida. I'm just not convinced that Brown is as good as Desharnais. And then you get Stecher, who's a decent defenseman, somebody who can play serviceable minutes on the third pair, but he's smaller guy. I'm not sure if he can replace Cody CC on the PK. So, they may look to add some more depth to the position. A name that has kind of come up is Dante Fabro out of Nashville. He's been on the in and out of the trade market the past couple of years. There was some speculation that they could look to swing a deal with Nashville because another young player there that could benefit from a change of scenery as well that the Oilers may have interest in is Philip Tomasino. Tomasino is a player that with all the additions they've made through free agency and whatnot might not. He's already had a situation where he went from being a regular to not being a regular, and now he's going to have a tougher time in that lineup. So I'm not sure exactly what the Oilers would move to Nashville if they swung a deal like that, but they're both two players that are young that could help the Oilers with cap purposes, obviously, if they work out, and they could be of interest to add some depth there. But at the same time, that's a couple of guys we've seen in the rumor mill maybe be linked to the Oilers, but it wouldn't also be shocking to see the Oilers maybe wait, not do anything, start the season with a little bit of cap space because they're going to want to accrue space so that they can add to the deadline. That's also important to them. And maybe they grab a defenseman on waivers. It could be as simple as that, trying to add an extra depth piece. There's going to be a ton of players that don't make the NHL rosters go through waivers. As training camps come to a close, at the end of September, early October, and there's going to be lots of opportunities for guys to move on, that are, depth moves. As far as forwards go, a guy like Tomasino, could he maybe fit there? Sure, maybe, but they got Podkolzin, right? Now, Podkolzin and Matt Savoy, who they got from Buffalo in the McLeod trade, now they're going to compete for that spot that Holloway had, right? So, and plus they have Raphael Lavoie still in the system there too, who's kind of a fringe player. So, in all honesty, I'm not sure the Oilers need to go out and make a trade. The article I was reading that linked them to the Nashville Predators kind of made sense, but I'm not sure what they would move to Nashville to pull that off. We know the Predators are also in talks to move Yaroslav Askarov. The Oilers wouldn't be in the mix there. But, when it comes to Askarov, the main team we're seeing there is Chicago. And it makes a ton of sense for Chicago. I've seen some link the Kraken to him as well. Again, I'm not sure exactly what they would offer, but goaltending wise, they would need to move Philip Grubauer. They have Joey Decord. He's not signed super long term, and he's not signed to a super expensive contract, but he's been their best goaltender. So having a tandem of Decord and Askarov, that sounds pretty good to me. But what do you do with Grubauer? So it would not be easy for the Kraken to pull off. Where Chicago, they have some goalies there too. But, somebody who could team with Mrazek, but, they have other goalies on their contract, but nobody in Chicago at least is signed long-term to big money. But that's the thing with Askarov. He wants to play in the NHL. So there's not too many teams that could be like, okay, yeah, we're going to guarantee that, and that's going to prove challenging, right? So, Chicago does make some sense. Now, there's also an article from TVA Sports talking about the Montreal Canadiens and wondering how quickly we may see a trade involving defenseman David Savard. Now, Savard's a player that I fully suspect will be traded sometime during the season, but, they're not in any hurry. David Savard's one of the few veteran defensemen, along with Mike Matheson, on that roster. They have lots of young guys there, so clearly, they're expected to lead by example, eat some big minutes. Savard's good in the PK. And if Montreal, with all the additions they've made, if they're trending towards even playing meaningful games late in the year, I'm still not convinced they're a playoff team this year, but they have a better chance now than they would have before with the additions they've made, there's no doubt. And if they're at least playing meaningful games and still in the mix as we're getting into like February, towards the last few weeks leading to the trade deadline, do they keep them as their own rental for the hope of maybe getting in the playoffs? I don't know, right? I would think Ken Hughes and Jeff Gortons knows what their expectations are. And to be honest, having David Savard or not having David Savard for a few weeks down the stretch, I'm not sure is going to make that much of a difference. A lot of people, though, think that the emergence maybe of Logan Mailloux this year might kind of force their hand and maybe allow them to move Savard earlier in the year. If they make a trade like that earlier in the season, it might actually be something that's more feasible, because if they give Mailloux more of an opportunity and he plays well, then they might feel more comfortable doing it. Although I don't see him jumping in and filling the shoes of a David Savard right away. Not exactly the same style of defenseman, but at the same time, the article for TVA Sports, like I said, it really talks about Savard being traded sometime this season, and I'm sure that's very likely to happen. But I just wonder about how their young defensemen in training camp in the early part of the season could kind of force their hand. They traded Jordan Harris. They still have a lot of guys, though. You're still gonna. We don't know exactly what their plans are for David Reinbacher this year. Is Lane Hudson going to get in the lineup? You've got Arbor Jacka, you got Jaden Struble. You still got Matheson and Gooley, and there's still lots of D there. So how quickly are they going to want to move Savard is a big question. And for me, I think it really boils down to what the offers are too. But if you run into a team early in the season that runs into some injury issues that are contending for the Stanley Cup, I can see David Savard being an attractive option there. So again, I think he's going to have a better chance to move earlier in the season than at the deadline, just because of the young defensemen are going to be pushing for ice time, and they may see that as a good opportunity to get that done. So let me know what you think down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. There's been lots of news lately, and hopefully it keeps up, so there's lots to talk about. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.